Well, what have we got here? Asbestos, old furniture, there's even a dead cat, which is not a good look, but that's what we found inside an empty hospital the government has kept locked up for 12 years. It's one of hundreds of properties worth hundreds of millions of dollars left to decay. Now, last year we investigated why nothing was being done with hundreds of abandoned schools, and now the picture gets even worse. Hospitals, fire stations, farms, houses, they're all in there. So we'll ask the government what it's doing about this in just a couple of moments. But first, Jahan Casanada lifts the lid on the land bank, and a warning, some of the pictures are not pretty.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're paying for this.
It's a lost opportunity, it's tragic, it almost seems disrespectful, really.
A place that can't be used and can't even be sold.
To let it decay away like this, it does hurt.
This is what's left of Tokanui Psychiatric Hospital in the Waikato. 3 security guards live on this site, watching 80 buildings fall apart. They're owned by you. They're still under guard, even though the hospital's been closed for 12 years.
When you see it happen to your own community, you get a real sense of empathy for what it's like for all those communities. And whenever I see the stories about rundown schools, hospitals or whatever, I know what it's like at least here, and it hurts a lot.
Ceilings caving in, beds left to rust, even the odd visitor in the corridors.
It was hard when the place closed down, but I certainly didn't expect to still see this after so many years.
At just 17, Dave Owen was working here as a nurse.
Very nerve-wracking. First day out in the wards, I don't think I'll ever forget what it was like as a first-year student.
So when you come back here now, it's a far cry from what it used to be, isn't it?
It's a ghost town now, isn't it? It is really hard seeing it like this, yeah.
When Dave arrived, there were 3,000 patients and 1,000 staff, one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals in the country. But 12 years ago, as these hospitals were phased out, the doors were shut. Last year, we revealed how millions of dollars of abandoned school buildings are being left to rot.
The community can't do anything with it. It's heartbreaking for us.
Now we can tell you there's more. Fire stations, farms, even houses, and hospitals like Tokanui. But do we really care about any of this? Well, there are 900 properties in the government's land bank, stuck in that land bank for years on end. And while they sit around like this, you and I are paying for the upkeep.
When you talk about the buildings down there, how it affected us was far greater than that.
Rowena has a strong connection with Tokanui. She worked here as a nurse. The hospital is on Rowena's ancestral land. Her iwi, Ngāti Maniapoto, has a claim on it.
And in 1908, the Crown decided to come south of the Puni River and take under the Public Works Act 5,000 acres on this side and 5,000 acres on that side to build a prison, this side to build the mental hospital.
When land is part of a treaty claim, the government holds on to it and puts it in a land bank. In that land bank, $400 million worth of unused property. The upkeep, $7 million a year.
We're waiting to have it back. I can't understand why they can't give it back.
In terms of karakia,
the iwi had big plans to turn Tokanui into the campus for Te Wānanga or Aotearoa.
The biggest tertiary institution in New Zealand. Can you imagine it sitting down there for use by all Māori people?
They even offered to buy it.
You were willing to buy the property back?
We were prepared to buy our property back.
And the government said?
And the government said no.
They were part of the hospital's history, and they wanted to be part of its future. The iwi didn't get their way. But what else could be done with a place like this?
This was like an intensive care ward, I understand.
Craig is a real estate agent who bought an old hospital in Dannevirke for himself. He's sold off some of the buildings.
And then the materials for the buildings that can't be removed have been recycled, right down to the nails.
Graham's been pulling it apart, finding money in the mess.
Everything that could be used again we've sold. The old theatre light is one example of something that hasn't sold yet. but it will.
There is some very valuable goodies.
$75,000 worth of remove flooring alone that I've sold.
It's removed, it'll be used for general joinery. The flooring will be relaid as flooring.
Craig has made a small fortune from one old hospital, but land-banked properties like Tokanui are not up for sale.
And what's your message to other taxpayers about that?
I'm not allowed to swear, am I?
DHBs are also holding on to empty properties. This one is the Kimberley Centre in Levin. It's been 4 years since it closed, and there's still no decision on what to do with it. For the community of Tokanui, their old hospital is still decaying, and until there's a change, you'll still be paying for it.
So the question is, what's the government doing about all of this? Treaty Minister Chris Finlayson is responsible for the land-banked properties. Good evening.
Good evening to you, Mike.
Doesn't it strike you as a monumental waste having all of these buildings?
Yes, it does.
And so what are you doing about it?
Well, it's a legacy issue we inherited. That hospital entered into the land bank in about 2000, Mike, and nothing happened for 9 years. It was brought to my attention soon after I became minister by the MP for Taranaki King Country, Shane Arden, because he's got some schools in his electorate that really worry him as well. I've gone to Cabinet on the issue of land banking. What we're seeking to do is have early engagement with iwi as soon as we know that we're dealing with the right iwi, talking about early release on signing of the deed of settlement, but importantly, Mike, getting on with the business of negotiating settlements, because Labor did about 14 settlements in 9 years. We've done the same number in 2.
OK, so what about the maintenance costs? They're ridiculous as well.
The maintenance costs are ridiculous, and we're looking for the very reason at the issue of early release so that we can deal with those issues as quickly as possible.
Do they have to go to the iwi if there's an iwi involved, or can they go to anyone? Like, some of those guys who are entrepreneurial want to recycle and rebuild and do things with them. Can they buy or not?
Well, as soon as the iwi work out whether or not they want them, they can be released. I don't understand why some of these properties need to be kept in the land bank for as long as they are. I mean, we're talking in some cases, Mike, about back street sections, residential sections in Te Arawa, and they're all plunked in the land bank, and I don't think it's fair on iwi that they should have to be confronted with making choices over such properties. It would be much better just to sell them off immediately, in my view.
Why do we have a land bank at all?
Well, because the government has a lot of land, and one of the things that iwi want more than anything is land, and so we make these properties available, but it's very unfair on iwi if a property stays in the land bank for as long as that one did. It was put in when Margaret Wilson was the Minister of Treaty Negotiations, and then it's left to rot because they just inherit a mess.
What about Kimberley at $1.3 million in maintenance? What's that about?
Well, it's a similar sort of situation to the hospital in the Waikato.
But when do we fix it? When do we get it sorted out? I mean, what's the timeline on flicking the properties and getting the money in the bank?
Well, I'm starting to deal with some of the iwi in the Kapiti district, the Manawatu district. I'm as keen as anything to get those settlements through so that some of those decisions can be made. And more importantly, even before we get to a settlement, once we know who we're negotiating with, and once we know that questions of overlapping claims are dealt with, we can say to them, look, guys, do you want this property or not? And hopefully early decisions can be made.
But why don't you just go to the iwi and say, look, we've got this property here, you're going to be interested or not, yes or no, you've got a week to decide, game over. If you're not, we're going to flick it, and then you can make the settlement with cash and apologies and whatever else you want.
Yeah, no, I understand the question, but we've got to know who we're dealing with. We've got to know that the group's mandated to be able to deal with the claim. But, I mean, the essential theme of what you're saying is not too far off the mark. That's what we're trying to head toward.
So when we'll be able
But giving people the opportunity, in fairness, giving people the opportunity to make a considered decision, I mean, it's totally unfair to say, right, you've got half an hour to make a decision on a property that's been in the land bank for 10 years.
So once the treaty settlement process is sorted out, that will solve the land bank problem, or will there still be properties there that are going nowhere fast?
No, it'll solve the land bank problem.
It'll be fixed, money will be in the bank.
Absolutely, and that those properties that are not required or needed or wanted can then be disposed of in other ways. But we're very keen, for that very reason, when we talked about 2014, as the aspirational goal for treaty settlements. I mean, this is one of the reasons. Shane Arden comes and tells me about properties and schools in Taranaki King Country that have been the centres of communities for many years, and people are very upset at the state of these properties. And that is why we were so critical of Labor for its frankly shameful performance between 1999 and 2008.
All right, that's the Treaty Minister, Chris Finlay.